All right.
Okay.
How are you?
Good.
You doing
Good.
great?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm fantastic as well. Let's get
How
this.
are you?
I'm good. Thanks for asking. Oh, welcome to The Harvest, episode 15, where we discuss everything cinema and story. And as we learn, you learn. As we grow, you grow. My name is Xavier Garcia.
I'm Jonathan Garcia.
All right. Well, last week we began discussing part one of a three-part series.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yep.
We were discussing how to kill your darlings.
Yeah.
How to kill your darlings in the creation of story. When making a movie, a story is rewritten 3 times. Mm-hmm. Something we discussed last week, that it is rewritten in the writing phase when the screenwriter is actually writing a script. It is that's when it's first written, rather, and then it's rewritten during the filming. Yep. During the production phase, and then the last time that it's rewritten is in the editing bay, in this when it is cut and rearranged and reworked, and a new story essentially is told. And so what we talked about last week is in the writing process, how you create darlings and how those darlings are to be killed. Today, part 2, we're going to be discussing in the filming process how darlings are created and how we plan on killing them as well.
Cool.
Yeah. So just a quick refresher.
Yeah.
And I'll go through my notes. What are darlings? I'm just going to read it as is, because that way we can maintain a consistent definition throughout all the episodes, so that everybody understands what we're talking about. Right off the bat, darlings in writing and in the writing process, darlings are words, phrases, sentences, paragraphs, and even chapters or whole scenes that we are often the most proud of. In the filming process, it could be a camera move, it could be a blocking for the actors, some sort of a prop or some setup, some scene setup or some lighting setup that you planned and you plotted out and you're totally in love with. And finally, in the edit process, it could be shots or some sort of a take that fits beautifully into the narrative workflow, or perhaps B-roll footage that's just magnificently filmed. And for animators, perhaps it could be like a certain background animation that took hours to create the intricate movements or what so. And these things are very often very dear, near, and personal to us, and they can become darlings. We love them.
Yeah, and that's really right there. The passion over that particular thing.
Yeah.
And trying to keep it or get rid of it.
Right. We love them so much to the point that we don't care if the darlings are clear to the audience or if they're not clear. Perhaps it could be confusing, but it doesn't matter, because somehow they've touched us in an emotional way where we're like, oh, this is great, either because we have worked on it for a long time, or it just resonates personally and uniquely to us for one reason or another. And we love them so much, but sometimes these things can become distractions to the audience, because what they mean to you may not be what it means to the audience, and it may be convoluting the story that's being told, or weighing it down, or confusing it in one way.
Well, a lot of times you enter into a feeling when you're writing something, and your feelings change every day.
Of course.
And so you're writing something that at that moment you probably are tearing up, or you have this idea for a shot and you're just like, oh, that's going to be so powerful, and I could just feel the mood.
Yeah.
But then, it's different when you're on set, or it's different when you're in writing, or it's different when you're in editing bay.
It could even be different the next day that you write.
Yeah, I don't feel what I feel. So a lot of times you have to reevaluate, is this going to be a feeling that you're going to have throughout? Have you really assessed that this feeling is going to be the same thing that your audience is going to feel?
It has to be connected to the story, right?
Yeah,
it has to be. It can't just be something that's personal and that's personally and uniquely connected to you, because the idea here is that you're telling this story, you're showing these characters, you're showing this narrative arc, and you're taking the audience on a journey, and they're supposed to be feeling something along the way. They're supposed to be picking up on some of these clues that you're putting in there, so that the audience is receiving the story. They're
Right.
receiving the message. They're
Yeah.
understanding.
Exactly. And we're humans. I mean, that's how we connect, you know. We're emotional beings, and we like to connect with one another with that emotion, you know, the essence of love and hate and anger, and all these are all just emotions that we use in film. So they're necessary. It's not like we're saying if you had an idea of this emotion, don't use it because don't get connected to it because, you know, it's
Right.
I mean, if you created something that you know that needs to be said, it just needs to be said well.
It needs to be said through the context of what you're, you know,
Right.
the story that you're creating. It needs to be said purposefully. Yes, well, absolutely. Well, how? Well, it needs to be said elegantly through dialogue. It needs to be said elegantly through action. It needs to be a visual, something visual on screen. It needs to be a part of the whole, this blueprint that's been created. And so that happens in the writing process. But when you get on set and you're filming, all of this stuff gets rewritten. The story becomes rewritten for a second time because you've got this group of individuals all brought together
Right.
from different disciplines, different backgrounds, all with different responsibilities, every single one overseeing a unique area in the filmmaking process, and they're all inputting through their all varied perspectives. You know, like whatever happened to them yesterday, the week before, you know, like that's the persona, the attitude that they're bringing to set, and with that they're making decisions, and every one of these decisions, whether visual or technical, somehow affect and inflict some sort of an influence into the story that's being told. And so these little micro darlings oftentimes pop up, and these things need to be killed.
Yeah.
Right? Can we talk a little bit about some of
Sure.
the filming darlings that are created in the filming process?
Yeah, you know, when you are, as a DP, when you are on set, as you mentioned, there are so many people's, you know, creativity that enter into that work process. And, you know, at times you have to think there are good reasons to kill darlings, and then there are bad reasons to kill darlings.
Yeah.
And that's very important, that as you go into this production process, you make sure that you are sticking with your plan, with your storyboards, with your script and
Shot list.
and your shot list,
all that stuff.
But then there are times when you will hit roadblocks, whether you know, the shot isn't suitable for the space.
Yeah.
Or whether
Like a camera move that just doesn't work inside the space. Yeah.
Exactly. Or if you're on set and you know, the lighting it doesn't really fit well with the space. Now, you say, well, didn't you think about these things before you got there?
Right.
It's like, yes, these are the things that you should have thought before you got there, but nonetheless, they still happen.
Yeah.
They still happen when you're on set and you're thinking, well, maybe if I switch it with a smaller rig or smaller camera, smaller equipment, I can try to get that shot.
Yeah, sometimes you can get it surprised, you know. I mean, like, for example, with Underground, we had already going into the space, the museum space, the warehouse. Well, it wasn't a warehouse, a bonded warehouse, you know, from the 1800s. We had already spoken. We pulled all of our permits and licenses and everything to be inside the space and to be filming. Everything was great. We had already come into terms and agreement as far as like the amount of voltage and ampage that we were going to be using in the space, because it's an old space, and so our lighting needed to be a very specific type of lighting. It had to be a tungsten. It couldn't be a tungsten lighting because it was going to be too hot for the museum space. It needed to be LED. We had talked about all of this. Everything was good. We told them that we were going to use foggers and all this and that.
Right.
And then on the day of, they felt as though they needed to send someone from like corporate, someone from the head of the Historical Society organization, the national branch, to come and supervise our filming, something that hadn't been talked about on the day of. We're an independent film project. We've only got 2 days that we're filming, and so we need every single second. And when they send this person over to say, hey, these are some of the changes that need to occur, some of this stuff, we did a little bit more research as far as the product that you're using in the aerosol cans. It's gonna affect, you know, this display in a certain way, and so we had to change all of that.
Right.
It was a last minute change.
Right.
So just to prove your point that like you can plan it,
Exactly.
and then last minute it changes.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's another section that I forgot to mention, the inevitable. It's like, something that you have no control over because of museum pieces.
And not acts of God, but like actual other individuals in the filmmaking process that affect change.
Right. Exactly. Like, for instance, budget. I know that James Cameron is very
He's notorious
for just
I need more money.
I need more money, and he gets it. But that's not us, And so when you have a budget and you're over budget, and that's pretty much the end of the day.
Right.
And so you have to find a way to make sure that you're working within all your means to make sure that you don't have to cut something out, the inevitable. Yeah. But the acts of God, storms, those are the things that you try to plan. You look at the weather, but you never know. In New England, the weather in New England is not something that you can
you're
prepare for.
Yeah, you're expecting to, like, with us, we were filming like a Blood Throne in April, and we were thinking, okay, this is great. It's gonna be a nice day out. You look at your weather app. It's gonna be it's gonna be sunny. We can do all of our outdoor shots, and then all of a sudden it's like a snowstorm.
Yeah, it's like a nor'easter comes out of nowhere.
April. Yeah. We're like, what is going on? We can't film, but we're like, okay, we're gonna have to change because we have 2 weeks. There are people that have flown in, like, from all over the country. This is a small independent short film, so we have to start on this day. So forget it. It's no longer a summer scene. It's a winter scene in ancient Jerusalem, in Masada, which is a hot climate area. But
and that's a cool thing. And I'll tell a quick story. Even in that, it's as we were there, we start to pray too. We're just like, how are we going to do this? How's this going to happen? And a lot of people that were on set know the miracles that occurred in our sets. We're just, we just begin to pray, and all of a sudden it just starts to rain. We're like, oh, great. Now it's raining.
Snow on top of the rain, so it's going to turn to ice.
Yeah, exactly, which was bad for the horses because the horses could slip. Yeah. But then all of a sudden, we end up seeing that there's a river forming, which is perfect for our scene, and and the coldness is actually solidifying the soil, which is good for the horses, and so we're just... Wow, everything was actually, came together. So sometimes, you just need a good prayer to put things back together.
And a lot of patience.
Yeah.
A lot of patience.
To make sure that your darlings are still in there.
Yeah.
But there's, the inevitable. But, then you'll end up confronting the ones where, you have to dig deep to be to rip out, to be like, you got to let this thing go. It's not working.
It's not. Well, it's not working, or finally someone just says to you, some other department head, you come together, you start to discuss kind of the visual story that's being told, and they say, look, this doesn't make sense. This isn't working. Here's we talked in one of our past episodes about how we make story Bibles for our films and even for our TV work, that we're not just, everybody knows you make a Bible for the arc of the seasons that you're creating for your show, right? For your TV show, streaming show, whatever it may be. But sometimes we also like to do that for our films. And the cool thing about that is that, all of the department heads will get all of this information that we've compiled over the course of the creation of this project, and they're able to look at it and reference, just kind of intention, design, ideas, and they can look at something that we've kind of trailed off on and be like, well, look, here's the world that you've created. I'm looking at the documents that you've given me, and it just doesn't make sense for X, Y, and Z. And then you kind of have that moment where you're thinking, oh, was that a darling? Is that something that I was imposing that came out of who knows where, what emotional state I was in at a certain point where I just imposed and brought in some sort of like visual or story change. And it happens. It happened with us on A Blood Throne. It happens. We talked a little bit about this last week. We can elaborate a little bit more on it this week. Just the camera move, the oneer that we wanted to do on A Blood Throne.
Yeah, right.
We had designed in the Masada Palace a scene, an opening to the scene where it was, just one long take. It was maybe like a 4 or 5 minute oneer, where it was going to kind of give us a tour through the space while Herod is in the tub complaining about his deteriorating body. Right. And it's kind of a back and forth between Herod and his sister. And the two of them, as they're talking, he's kind of beginning to get agitated, and he's got all of these servants all around him working on him, and the camera was going to be really interactive in that moment, and we wanted the audience to be really involved and engaged in the scene.
Right.
But what happened?
Yeah. Well, it was a tough one. We had equipment. We had a slider or not a slider, a glide cam.
Yeah, we had the glide cam to set up.
We wanted to find a way where we didn't want to kind of be so cumbersome in that small space. But it didn't work out. It just didn't work out. It was too tight.
And we had planned it.
Yeah.
It wasn't that we didn't plan it. It was on paper. We had written it. We had drawn it. We did all of our top downs of like the trajectory of the camera, the direction, how it was going to go over the water, all that cool stuff.
And all the shots that we had, right? And all the shots that we had created didn't work. It wasn't seamless with the Oneer. It didn't bridge. The Oneer didn't bridge them together. It actually separated them.
Yeah.
And so we realized after all the shots that we had that were necessary to the story, the Oneer actually didn't blend with it.
Yeah.
And after looking at it, we're just like, all right, we did do takes. We took 2 or 3 takes. And it was there where we actually decided, it wasn't in the editing room, it was there where we decided we're not doing any more takes because we're not going to use this shot.
Right. And that's actually, I'm glad that you brought that up. The fact that it was on set as we were working this thing. Well, we're looking at our dailies at the end of each day, and we're like, this Oneer isn't going to blend. Like, it just isn't going to work. I mean, we love it, and we talk so much about it. You remember, we were talking to so many people about how we were going to pull it off because we needed to bring in the assets, the equipment in order to create this. I mean, we rented equipment. I mean, we spent money specifically for this shot, and we had a very limited budget. And and we were hyping up how awesome this shot was going to be, and I remember like just trying to hang on as much as we possibly could. Like, maybe there's a way, maybe there's a way, maybe there's a way. And you and I, after discussing it, we were like, it just isn't gonna work. Like, we'll talk to the line producer later, but let's just make this decision now. And,
well, I mean, in our industry, time is also money. Because at the end of the day, as I was saying, there's the inevitable, then there's the good reasons to get rid of them, and then there's the bad ones, which is when time continues to expand, people start to get tired. And they start to say, they start to not be as effective, and that's our industry. Late nights, hard work. And the last thing you would want to do is to make a choice based off the fact that we're tired. That's not a good reason for you to not do a shot. You just got to push through it. That's our industry. We just got to push through the shot and get everything that we need.
So let me give another example. Another example that we had was on the film Crossroad. On the film Crossroad, it was about the story of the Emmaus disciples. The Emmaus disciples on their road, back to Emmaus after having, been disappointed of the apparent, death of Yeshua, and they're like, okay, this guy died. He didn't rise. So this is over. Game's over. Let's go home. And I don't know if you remember some of the conversations that we had regarding these 2 disciples, because traditionally these disciples were always depicted as males, 2 male disciples. And we talked a lot about this, and we went into the scriptures, and we even went into like extra, we went and researched Josephus, and we just tried to find examples of all of this stuff, and we finally decided, prayerfully considering all of the backlash that could come potentially, that it needed to be a husband and a wife. And because we were making really specific, detailed decisions about, long-standing pieces of literature, the Bible, it's everyone for some reason.
You're competing against what's been created as well.
And and for some reason, we don't know why, everyone has always assumed that these were just 2 guys. Sometimes people will say a father-son, or 2 friends, or just 2 disciples. But we thought, it needs to be a husband and a wife.
And there was plenty to back that up.
There was.
And there were women disciples everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. So it didn't come from a void. We had plenty of proof, but it was a choice that we made. It was a creative choice. And so we realized that we needed to then be very detailed and very careful about how we design all of these characters. Every character had their costumes. They had their props. They had, from head to toe, everything was specifically and uniquely designed a certain way because we were making some pretty bold choices. And so we needed to have everything perfect because we didn't want to face any more backlash about anything that was off, We didn't want the attention to be drawn off the story that we were trying to tell our own unique way. And so I don't know if you remember this. Nathan De Hoyos was playing the character of Yeshua, of Jesus. And this was a day that we only had one day to shoot this because we had gotten the permit to be on a very unique location. We were in Peabody.
Yeah.
And in Peabody, we were at a DPW, at a Department of Public Works location where there's a ton of trucks that had to come in to do work. And we had asked them for this day, we're filming, can you just stop all DPW operations in the town of Peabody? And we weren't paying, we did get we did get permission and we got everything, but we didn't pay to stop production in this town. And they were like, yes. So we're like, we need every split second of this day, and we need to film, and we need everything to go right. And so we have our lead actor playing Yeshua, Nathan. We had picked out all his outfit. Everything was beautiful. It was perfect. And he shows up, and he doesn't have his sandals. He doesn't have sandals. So some might think, what's the big deal? Well, first and foremost, for a couple of reasons. Number one, safety.
Yeah,
this place, this place was a DPW work site. And so, sometimes, even though it looked like ancient Jerusalem, it was beautiful, sometimes there were, screws in the ground and, random pieces. And we're like, you need sandals. And he's like, yeah, I forgot my sandals. And we're like, we don't have time for you to go back to your house.
It's kind of hard to yell at Jesus.
Yeah, we're yelling at Jesus.
Where are your sandals, Jesus?
Jesus, where are your sandals? So anyway, so we're yelling at Jesus, and Nathan is a really near friend of ours. No. We've been doing work with Nathan since our theater days, way back since 2005, 6, 7. So we know him, and so pulling him to the side and being like, well, how could you forget your sandals? And Nathan has this really soft-spoken, really serene, really calming voice about him, which is why we so often cast him as Jesus in the biblical films that we do. And so when he talked back and he was like, I'm sorry. And because he was in character too, he's like, I have forgotten my sandals. And I'm like, you're right. Maybe that was the way it was meant to be. He convinced us. Yeah. It's like, okay, so here's
we're going barefoot.
Yeah, we're going barefoot.
That's we're moving forward.
So we go barefoot. We're like, forget it. Jesus is barefoot. He's going to be barefoot. And we didn't realize at the time.
Yeah.
Because we had designed it so perfectly. Sure. This was a darling. We're like, it needs to be this way. Yeah. Jesus needs to look this way. We had all of our drawings and all of our sketches and our photos and all of our Pinterest images of how he was going to look. And we had picked for him the specific sandals, and he forgets them. And we're like, was that a darling? Was that something that we needed to have
and remember,
killed?
We did the poster before that moment.
Oh, I didn't even think of that. Was the poster done prior to that?
It was done before that, so it didn't click to us.
It didn't click. You're right.
Go ahead.
Okay, so what we realized became a theme to the film was this barefoot Jesus. Mm-hmm. Barefoot Jesus became a theme to the whole movie, and at the time we weren't even thinking about it, and we didn't realize that we had created a darling, out of these sandals. And when we were, for those of you that are, you can look up, we'll put the poster, a link to the poster in the show notes so that you can see the poster is really just the feet of Jesus in this jagged, sandy terrain. And it almost is as if he's, kind of about to take a step forward, and you can see the hem of his garment, the torn, tattered hem of his garment, and it's dirty because he's been walking along the mountains, and it was playing off of, that Isaiah scripture that says, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. Right. And so the assumption is that he's been walking and
right,
and traversing.
Filthy in the eyes of man.
Broken, hurting, and here is Nathan barefoot on this broken terrain, himself kind of walking a little bit like, ooh, ah, ee, ah,
It was a resurrected Jesus. Barefoot resurrected Jesus. Yeah.
And it worked beautifully.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the message, the story, those undertone little things that you pick up when you watch it, you're like, wow, that says a lot, and it's consistent with what we've created without knowing, So it was really cool to see. It was like, wait a minute, he was barefoot. Our poster, he was barefoot.
Yeah.
It's fine. It works. It works. It works.
Rejoice.
So, yeah.
And so then day 2, he brings his sandals. We're like, get rid of those things. Get those things out of here. We don't need no sandals.
Yeah. So it was a great surprise, but it was one of those things where we're just like, we have time. We have to do this.
And interesting, we talked last week, just an identifier of a darling is that when something comes up where your darling is being challenged and something inside of you is like, no, then that's when is that a darling? And that happened, as a director with me, where, and having done so much of the art department work ourselves personally, we were like, those sandals need to be there. That's when we realized, this is a darling, this might have to die. And then when we allowed it to die and moved forward, then we started to understand how it could become a theme and how we could justify this into the story and how it actually elevates the story for him to be barefoot Jesus.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes darlings are just maybe the creative who thought of it, trying to prove an artistic point, trying to show their creative muscle, or they're trying to be unique in some way, and those are usually never a good reason for them to stay. Yeah.
Now, aside from just props, props, blocking, setups, costumes, camera moves, there have been times where the introduction of a new technical resource, some technical items, some equipment, has influenced the blueprint, the story. And it happens, especially in independent film. In independent film, so often things are borrowed, donated, or found. We find something like, this is great, let's use it. And these things affect that which was pre-planned. You've planned everything out, you've got it all to the T, and then all of a sudden you have access to something that you didn't have before. You're lent or you're borrowed or something. You just come across something that is going to elevate the story, that is going to make the story better. Whether it's the execution of the story or, it's just, the feel, the theme, it just makes it better. It happened with us on Armor of God. Armor of God, we were, this is one of our very first shorts. This is going back a few years now, and we had never done narrative work with an actual Steadicam suit. We had done some commercial work, but even with the commercial work, a lot of that was, although we had the Steadicam, it was like everything was plotted and you didn't really need it. It was just more so for the fluidity of the movement. But for this, it was a Steadicam that we could use for the entirety of the film. And it influenced the story.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, once you introduce specific equipment, you begin to realize what you've given yourself. You've given yourself an opportunity for different ways to tell a story.
Yeah. And so it elongated our chase scene. And so, we had writers on set. We had a chase scene. The chase scene was supposed to go from point A to point B and not past point B onto point D, right? But because we had the Steadicam, we're like, let's go to point D. E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P.
We also had a jib that was introduced. So we had a lot of equipment that day.
Yeah, and it was a bunch of things that got
use it. Yeah, as independent filmmakers doing this for the first time, we're like, let's just use it all. Let's make everything look epic.
Right.
And that's when we're just like, when he runs through there with the Steadicam, the jib comes up and pulls him up, gets a nice establishing shot with the jib, and then he goes into the next scene. And so we just executed a very cool establishing shot that was great for the rest of the short.
And so we thought, this is a moment where I guess this is interesting, this is unique, because we thought that we were elevating the storytelling. We thought that we were being humble by allowing ourselves to mold and change and shift. It's like, all right, well, let's humble ourselves. Yes, we planned all of this, but look, we've got all this good stuff. Let's just change it and shift it, and it didn't end up making the final. It didn't end up making the final film.
Right. No, it didn't. It was actually cut, and the jib shot was awesome.
Yeah, it was nice. So the shots were beautiful.
Yeah.
The chase scene was beautiful. It was fluid. The jib shot was cool. It was rising,
action-packed.
But it did not elevate the story.
No. Yeah.
It didn't. it didn't change. And so we realized and this was interesting because it's a two-parter. This is kind of like killing darlings on set and then killing darlings in the edit room. So we'll talk a little bit about this same exact moment also in the edit room and why we changed the way that we changed. Mm-hmm. But on set, when we arrived on set that day, look at all of the toys that we have. Let's go from point A to point D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P with this Steadicam. We thought that we were killing darlings. We thought that we were doing, something benevolent and chivalrous and humble and beautiful to one to another. And we're like, yes, I'll serve you by humbling myself and allow you to use this equipment, But it wasn't. We were actually damaging the story by doing so. And so that was not a darling killing moment, and we didn't get to, unfortunately, we were so young in our filmmaking that we didn't recognize that on set. We recognized it in the edit room. And that's another section. That's next week's section when we're going to talk about filmmaking. But that also has happened on the flip side, where not that you've had new equipment, but equipment wasn't available. So we had planned, for example, in Underground, there was an opening shot. Yeah. Very important opening shot to the movie. And it was a shot, and I'll let you talk a little bit more about it, but it was that upside down shot where you had designed, okay, we're going to have a cage in order to bring this shot and turn it upside down because it was supposed to juxtapose two worlds, a world that was upside down being turned right side up. Right. And the idea behind that was that we were playing with light and dark. This opening scene was played in the dark, a lot of shadows, very dark, and the second scene was played in the light, very bright. And traditionally, darkness is associated with evil and with wrong, against the law, and light is good, wholesome, purity, righteousness. But in the light scenes, we had the bad guys, and in the dark scenes, we had the good guys, but the good guys were doing something that was technically considered illegal, but was true righteousness, and the bad guys were doing something that was considered legal but evil. And the opening shot was supposed to establish all of that. Right. This upside down moment, the world turning upside down.
Yeah, and you nailed it. I think in the cool thing about that was you have to also think about the time in the 1850s. Right. That's how the society perceived what was happening. In that way. Yep. In the day, what the bad guys were doing at the time was okay. They passed a law. In the dark, what the good guys were doing is what's okay today, which is, abolitionists, the freeing of slaves and trying to...
But at the time, it was illegal.
It was illegal, so they're hidden. They're underground. Yeah. And that was the thing, that the opening shot was literally under. Yeah. That was the idea. Yeah, to enter in the shot upside down to let the world know that what we're seeing them upside down. So they're under. They're showing us that what they're doing is off balance. And the moment that we adjust, it's like the audience, we're making the audience adjust to them to be like, oh, but let's really see what they're doing. Yeah. And the shot was awesome on storyboard. Yeah.
It was drawn out beautifully. It was prepared beautifully. Story-wise, it made sense. We knew why we were doing it. We knew why it was important. And then what happened?
And then it was gone. And we did some attempts. Again, one of the things that I like to do in Xavier is we do give things a chance. Yeah. If it is going to, if we know off the bat, no, then we're not going to waste time. We'll move on. Yeah. But if
there's a glimmer of hope,
then we'll give it a try. Yeah. We'll see how it looks. We adjust. We pay attention to time. We pay attention to, the list and what we need to do. But we scratched it.
But the cage wasn't just we didn't have the equipment.
Exactly. The cage that we needed for it wasn't available. Yeah. The crew that we had involved to help us with the equipment didn't have it in their kit. Yeah. And so, again, one of those things where you're dealing with a museum and the scheduled time. Yeah. And
we can't just leave, can't go get this. We can't read, we got to get in with what we have and make it work. Right. And we tried and tried. We tried to make it work with the equipment that we had, and the shot just wasn't working.
Yeah, it wasn't working, not how we envisioned it, and we had to move forward after like take 2.
No, well, yeah, I mean, we took some time to do it. We gave it a valiant effort. The setup took a long time, and then we realized we're losing way too much time.
Yeah.
We got to move forward. It didn't work out. We had, from this hour to that hour allotted specifically for the shot, and I'm kind of bummed out about that because I'm going to be honest with you, the movie needed it.
Yeah.
You can tell it needed that, and it wasn't something that you could do in post. It just wasn't working in post, and I tried. Trust me. You remember
we had to do some research on some stock footage and try to find a way to establish the scene. Yeah. And it wasn't
working.
Yeah, it wasn't working. So
it
was a darling that was inevitable.
Yeah, it was something that we were kind of forced into cutting, and I'm kind of bummed out about that one. So that one, I don't know, that was a darling that we had created. That it was a moment that was unique to us. It was personal to us. It came out of like a lot of emotional back and forth and discussion about what we were trying to do with theme in this film. There was a theme. What's evil is good and what's good is evil. That upside down nature, the upside down. Nature of these two different worlds coming together. And we got excited about it. We were really pumped about it. We had it planned, we had it plotted, and it got killed for us. And I don't know that it necessarily categorizes in this topic the same way as far as killing your darlings, but it was a darling, and it was one that should not have been killed. It was a part of our voice, our creative voice as storytellers. And last week we talked a lot about for example, Scorsese, who has a lot of keeps a lot of darlings in his films. He has a creative voice, a very specific style, and things that come out of his childhood, that comes out of him being raised in New York, the gritty lifestyle that he had himself, almost having become a priest. A lot of what he creates on film comes from that past, and a lot of darlings are therefore infused. And sometimes some of those things shouldn't be killed. Sometimes they can't be killed. Sometimes they can be killed. He has a following. He has an audience. He has a past and a history that he's able to, over time, create an audience that is willing to sit through this stuff. With us, it was a part of our own faith upbuilding. A reason why we wanted to include this shot had very much to do with certain scriptures and things, and so it was emotionally tied into us. We did want to see that in there, and I don't know, I'm still bummed out that it got taken away.
Sometimes like I said earlier, sometimes sometimes there are darlings you got to fight for, and sometimes there are darlings that you have to go rescue from the moment that you got rid of them during pre-production, and you're putting them in.
You got to go back
during production. It's like, no, that idea actually is going to work here. This shot will definitely work here. Something that we got rid of, earlier on. So, it's not always just killing them. Sometimes it's rescuing them. Sometimes it's hanging on to them.
Darlings. I like that.
And so. It's important because they meant so much. They will say a lot.
Yeah.
The whole point is, will they say what you want them to say?
Right.
And that's really what it is.
Will they say that which supports the story?
Yeah.
Makes it better, elevates it.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Next section. So, still within the topic of darlings, we're going to talk about how the entire team is a part of the darling killing process, right? Because they are.
Yeah.
Everyone's involved in this process. Film is it's so collaborative. The filmmaking process is extremely collaborative. Everyone brings ideas on the set, and all these ideas, they influence what the writer originally put down on paper, right?
Yeah.
Yes, the script, hands down, the script is the blueprint. Okay, everyone is looking at this blueprint. Everyone's looking at this document. It's the plan. It's the process. It's the guide. It's the guidelines. That's what this blueprint is. The script.
Right.
But the people.
Yeah.
The people are the DNA.
Right. First of all, the moment that script lands in the director's hands, you expect.
It's going to change.
Ideas.
Yeah, because there's going to be so many people that are going to bring their character. I mean, look, it's a living, breathing story. All right, film is a living, breathing organism, and these people are the DNA that give it life. And you've got a DP, you've got a director, you've got you've got your art department, with your art director and your HMU, and you've got, just so many individual people. I mean, even the caterer affects the story, because if everybody gets
Right.
there's no food. Everybody gets sick, from something, and everybody's miserable on set. It's like it's going to affect the story. So everybody is part of the DNA, and the story is going to change as a result of it. Therefore, relationships are important. You like directors have to have a great relationship with their DP, with their art director. Like, those relationships are crucial, because it's those individuals that are going to be talking to each other and killing each other's darlings. And so you need to know that you trust the person that is working with you and next to you, like that you have a shared vision, that you have a shared passion, that you know what the end result is and what the goal is.
Absolutely. No, there are people we've worked with that have said it's kind of scary how these two can start and finish each other's sentences. And that's really good. That's why the Coen brothers always work together. That's why the Kendrick brothers always work together.
I mean, even Christopher Nolan, you can tell the times when Christopher Nolan doesn't work with Jonathan Nolan.
Right.
You can tell it's evident. You see it. And the times that they do work together are the times where he's creating, his masterpieces. That's when you get the Dunkirks. That's when you get
so I think he said it.
The one where he's a magician.
His brother started writing it, and then he took it over.
But the one where the two magicians. Oh gosh, it's such a good film. The one that I always tell you got to watch it. You got to watch it. But anyway, with Hugh Jackman. Like that.
We'll comment it below.
But it'll randomly pop in my brain at some point. The Prestige. See. But like, you can tell, he worked with his brother, and they've worked together for so long. They can challenge each other in the creation process. Jonathan as a writer, just kind of like talking to Chris about, okay, well, this needs to, this area in Inception just doesn't make sense. You're trying to go for this high concept, time within time, dream within a dream, but like, you got to ground it here. And he brings the grounding in these areas, and they kill each other's darlings. And that's why they've got these elevated stories that blow people's minds. You have to have those relationships. You have to have them on set. They're a must, because you need to be able to the DP needs to be able to turn to the director and say, hey, this doesn't play well visually.
No, we've worked with crew members in the past where, they are professionals. In their mind, they see things a certain way. Sometimes they, want to play the role that is above them, and they'll end up kind of challenging your darlings. And one of the things that you have to perceive is you have to be able to have that patience to be able to articulate, and also you do have to prove, in a sense, why it's necessary. Because then if you can't prove why it's necessary, it shouldn't be there at all. You have to believe it in yourself before you can make someone else believe it.
Believe it and be able to back it up, and have a firm understanding, grasp on it in order for you to communicate, okay, this is the reason why I feel this idea, this shot, this color, this prop, this thing, fits into the story. And obviously the director, has the final say, but if you can dialogue, if there's a relationship between the two of you there where you have established this over the course of the creation of this film, like having some talk, sitting down, getting together over a cup of coffee or tea, whatever, like during the pre-production or the research and development phases, really getting to know one another, understanding what makes each other tick, like what gets each other excited, that kind of stuff is super important, because you're going to be working so intimately with these individuals, with these persons on set, that when you challenge one another with darlings, you got to know that it's coming from a place of like, look, remember, we're in this together. We both want the very best.
Very best.
We want the best for this product. And here's a perspective that I bring to the table that perhaps you may not have seen.
Right, and you have to make sure of that even before they come on set, that they want the same very best that you want for this project.
Yeah, and everybody has a different personality types. Sometimes some people are more emotional, some are more stoic, and as long as everybody agrees that you're in this together, you're working on the same project, it's the same vision, a unified vision. Because sometimes there's such miscommunication that people aren't working on the same project. Mm-hmm. They may be together on the same set, but they're not working on the same project.
No.
One person thinks that they're making this for themselves, for their reel or whatever, and this other person thinks that they're making this other thing, and it creates a lot of conflict on set that it slows things down. And you can see it. You can see it. You can see it in the final product. You can see where there was conflict in the final product.
Yeah, and at the same time, you'd be surprised of what other person comes up with. The actor will say, "Can I say this line differently? Or can I just not say it at all and do this?" Yeah. And you realize, wow. That was
we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there to actors. That's a huge section. So let's not get ahead. I'm glad that you brought it up because that's a big section. But like, for example, with relationships, like with the art department. Let me give an example because we had an example that came up in Crossroad. The art department is going to be choosing, props. They're gonna be designing these things. They're gonna be aggregating them from all over the world, depending on what it is that you're creating. Like if you need something, like for us when we're doing some of our biblical sets, for example, certain things just need to come from certain areas and certain locations. We had to bring in, for example, candles, lanterns from Israel in order for us to light our sets, and it was stuff that was specifically and specially made out there. They're gonna color the set. They're gonna give you ideas of color and drapes and fabrics, texture, all of that stuff. And all of these decisions, every single one of them are like micro stories within the story. Mm-hmm. Like if it's a sheer curtain versus a solid fabric, that's a micro story within a story, because the audience sees this beautiful satin sheer curtain and immediately they're thinking expensive, royalty. The color purple, they're thinking royalty, they're thinking expensive. And you make these choices that tell stories within the story. And sometimes someone can get so attached to a choice that it, for whatever reason, an emotional reason, whatever it may be, that like they don't want to let go, and it's actually hindering the larger story that's being told. That happens all the time. You were laughing. Is there an idea, an example that you had in mind?
One that I'd keep to myself.
Okay. Fair enough. That happens.
Yeah.
But you know what? Like, everyone immediately will react to something that they see.
Sure.
You'll react to it. You're seeing something, you're going to react to it. Even like in nature, fight or flight, right? That fight or flight reaction that we have. We see something, we size it up. Is this thing going to kill me? Should I fight it or should I run away from it? And like when you look at it right away, you're seeing, okay, it's got muscles. It's it's 7 feet tall. Well, what do I have that can defeat it? You're going through and you're checking all these things out, and there are all of your senses are being tickled at this moment. Visual, audio, audible. Like is sometimes you hear a lion's roar. Mm-hmm. That is to scare off its prey or to establish itself as a dominant. The dominant voice, and so the art department has these choices that cause for the audience to see, visually being influenced and inputted with information and micro stories that are going to affect the story at large. You've heard the term where someone's like, I was emotionally wrecked. Like they watched something, I was like, I was emotionally wrecked.
I was an emotional wreck.
Yeah, I was like, that can happen with visual cues. You can see something, like I'm thinking of like Road to Perdition. I watch that movie. Every time I watch that movie, it just wrecks me emotionally. I'm like, it just breaks me. And that, Sam Mendes, as he's, creating these visuals along, with his DP, their art department, they're conscious choices. They're conscious choices that are going to mess with our psyche. They're going to mess with us in a way where we're drawn either to like our own personal experiences with our own dad, talking about, that specific film, or experiences that we've had psychologically, dreams, just things are brought up. And it's therefore so important that you're all communicating together, that you are all on the same page. We had an example in Crossroad with the sheep. I don't know if you remember the sheep example in Crossroad. We had, so Crossroad is the one that we did in Peabody on the DPW site.
Right.
And we were supposed to have this area, because as Jesus is talking, there was supposed to be sheep all over the field, and he's supposed to talk as grazing, he's going into, they're grazing, he's going into the village. And we couldn't get sheep on this DPW hill. Now, it's the perfect place for us to do ancient Jerusalem in modern New England.
Which was funny because there was a farm there, and the people that were actually working the area, we asked them, also, can we get the sheep on set? And they were like, yeah. They said, yeah. And then when they went to go look up on the hill and figure out, well, ours are kind of wild. They're not trained. They don't have a shepherd coming in here, guiding them with a stick. They're behind a fence, and that's what they do. And so he's like, yeah, no, we can't do it. So literally it was last minute thing where we ended up finding another solution.
Yeah. And the space itself wasn't conducive to having animals. And he's like, the DPW guy, when we were talking to him, he's like, that there are wild coyotes that come out here too. You can't just have sheep on the other side of the hill. It's gonna get grabbed by the neck and hauled away. Right. And so we're like, okay, what do we do? So we spoke to the farm. We were working with Brooksby Farms in Peabody for this one.
We called them. Yeah.
We called them and we're like, okay, we're gonna scrap having the sheep up at the DPW hill, but we're gonna come to you. We're going to come to you and we're going to film there. We're going to film at the farm. And they're like, we're open and we've got people coming through. And we're like, all right, when do you open? We open it at 10 a.m. All right, we'll be there at 5.
Super cool dude, by the way. He was like, yeah, man, just come. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, they're phenomenal at Brooksby Farm. They're phenomenal there. So if you're from the area, if you're from New England, go check out Brooksby Farm. Hook them up. Patronize. Bring your money there and shop there, and they're phenomenal. They have cider there, and they got donuts and cool stuff. In the fall. But nevertheless, so we go. They've got their sheep, and we throw together a green screen. We're like, okay. Let's just throw together this green screen.
Put up this green screen right in the middle of the field, and the sun's coming in, which is shining on the wrong side of the green screen, which is changing its color. And then the farmer guy's, so what do you want me to do? You want me to throw some apples? So he's just launching apples at the green screen so that the sheep would just run by it, and it worked. It was surprising, but sheep bring up production quality. You can't have.
We needed the sheep. We needed the shepherd, Yeshua, amongst the sheep as he's shepherding these two disciples.
Yeah.
It was part of our visual. It was part of the story that we were trying to tell. And so we're like, okay, this darling can't be killed. We can't get rid of the sheep. So what are we going to do? Let's just bring the story to them. Just bring production to them. And yeah, it was a fun day.
It was funny because in that area, there wasn't just sheep. There were donkeys. There were goats. There was everything. Everything. And then they're throwing apples, and all of a sudden you see a goat.
Yeah, the goat went after the apple. No, not the goat. We want the sheep. Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah. So it was fun. We had the time, which was rare.
Yeah.
And we were able to kind of get the shot and put it in production, which was a good saver, and a better actually because at the end of the day, the shot was also another blue screen on the other end, which worked well to splice all the content together.
Yeah, it worked. Yeah. But you know what? Again, it's about relationships. We had established a relationship with the farmer at Brooksby. He was super cool. And he was able to amend and to change and to accept, kind of the changes that we were applying in order to make this whole thing work. That's why you often see, like you were saying, brothers that work together as DP director. You named a few, like Joel and Ethan, Chris and Jonathan, Alex and Steve, Kendricks, and all these different brother pairs, Irwin brothers, that work together because there's just such a collaborative means, and there's so much push and pull, and there's so much all right, fix this, change that, challenging one another, and when it's like family like that, there's no qualms about challenging one another and pushing each other to the limit. And, you know, obviously you got to be professionals. On a film set, whether or not you're related, there's that professionalism goes across the board, and you should be able to challenge each other professionally. Absolutely.
Right,
That's how you elevate the product.
Respect each other as well.
Out of respect, and in respect. Exactly. It's a must. It has to happen. Yeah. But it's easier. For me anyway, for us, well, that's the only way we've ever known how to work. I know that you know that I love you, and not only that I love you, but that I respect the art in you, your perspective. I honor it and admire it. And so if I'm challenging you, it's because I'm pulling more of that out, because I know it's not in me, you know, and it's super important, and that should be across the board in all film sets. Like, there should be that respect. Like, all of these people that are coming to work there are offering their time, they're offering their value and who they are, and they're bringing this to the table. And that's why, you know, like, I personally love that collaborative aspect of filmmaking. Yeah. It's beautiful. Yeah. Finally, talking about actors and the input that actors bring, because actors are also going to bring a change to the story, because they have studied the script from a perspective that a director could never.
They have become what you wanted them to become.
Yeah. And so they're going to bring new ideas. They're going to bring changes. They're going to bring, and for me as a director, I'll invite every and any change as long as it can be justified. You know, I'll say, justify that for me. You know, talk me through it. Justify.
I remember hearing that, I think, in one of our last podcasts, is that they're very open to suggestions.
Yeah.
And we are. I mean, at the end of the day, we're here to make this thing better.
Right.
You know, and if it means better during production, we're not being like, oh, you should have told us it was better during pre-production. You should have told us that a long time ago. It's too late now. No, I mean, there's always room for better. There's always room for better.
Yeah. And you're going to see some amazing things. We talked last week about, you know, in Indiana Jones. In Indiana Jones, there was that moment there, you know, where Harrison Ford is tired from having done, you know, production work prior to this one major epic battle scene, you know, and you've got this guy with his swords, and he's, you know, showing off about how he's going to chop him up and dice him up, and Harrison Ford, you know, exhausted, you know, to the director, what can I just shoot this guy? I got a gun in my pocket. Why am I going to use my whip? And why am I going to use a sword? And, you know, it's boom, shoots him, and everyone's like, wow. I'm sure, I can only imagine what the director was going through, like hoping for an epic sword fight, you know, like this is going to be a great sword fight. And Harrison Ford was like, justified, look, I know that I'm not only am I physically tired from having filmed, but I also just came from a scene where, you know, I'm as a character tired. The last thing that I would want to do is engage this guy in a sword fight. Let me just shoot him. And it's in his character. It's that he's that type of a maverick that he would just do that, and it works.
Right.
It also worked. You know, this is an example that I looked up that I remember. I don't know, 4 years ago. Gene Wilder died, and a lot of information about him as an actor started to come out, and there was a lot of writing about his entrance in the 1971 Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. I don't know if you remember, in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, when he comes out, he's on a cane, and he's walking and he's hurting, and the cane gets stuck in the cobblestone, and then he takes a couple of steps, and everybody's looking at him, and they're like, he's going to fall. And he starts to fall, and then he rolls, and he comes up, and he's there. And that was not a part of the original story.
Yeah, I remember it.
And Gene Wilder, you know, he wrote a letter to the director, and he says, the only way that I'm going to take this role is if you allow me to change this opening. And the director was like, what is it about him and this opening? Why does he want this opening to be changed? And he asked him, like, why do you want this opening? And Gene Wilder replied, because from that moment on, from that time on, no one will know if he's lying or telling the truth. And that was a theme in the film. Like, is this world a world of pure imagination? You know, like this world, is he lying or is he telling the truth? It was going to add to his character, and he brought that because he became it, and he learned it. In actors, if you give your actors, and I'm talking to, you know, directors and writers and producers, you give your actors that kind of a breathing room, some beautiful things can be brought into your process. You may have to kill some of your own darlings in order to make room for some of these, like, amazing, whether it's improv where it happens on set that day, which is a lot of, happens a lot. On the sets of like comedies, like Seth Rogen and Judd Apatow and so like those guys, they do a lot of improvising, and and they have their product and they have their audience and they cater in their own way to their people, but they're able to do a lot of improvising like that, and sometimes funny things come out of some of those things, some of those moments where you just allow actors to be themselves. Like for example, for us in Underground. The character Tommy and Arissa's characters were they got to a certain point in their relationship with one another, and they knew so much about their past and about whom they were and the person that they were bringing, that they started to like some of their nuances in relating to each other became their own, and it was stuff that wasn't necessarily blocked that way because we rehearsed that scene a ton. We rehearsed it like if it was almost theater, and that was something that we had consciously decided that we were going to bring a very rehearsed and very polished blocking to the set because we had such limited time. But they knew themselves so well that they were able to add little bits and pieces into their interaction, and it made them more believable as husband and wife. Which was cool.
Yeah, no, they did a phenomenal job, and I think that you got to open up. You have to have the freedom for creativity in your set.
Yeah. Cool. That's
awesome.
That's time now for Creator's Tip of the Week. Creator's Tip of the Week. Jonathan, what do you got?
Well, I have a friend who is in the comic book kind of industry, or he's been involved in it for a while, and he confessed to me, talking about how they're struggling during this time, during COVID-19, and I know that there's still a lot of people at home working, and also are have an artistic passion, and I thought, how great would it be to give them resources for that talent to be used in comic book creating. Because the industry right now is hurting, to try to kind of create a buzz again, and so I thought of a few applications, and one of them is Pixon. Pixton, maybe Pixton, Pixton.com. And it's an application you can create comic book strips and designs and drawing and stuff like that. Yeah. And then there's another one in Canva, which is usually a postcard creating one. There's a comic strip section where you can actually add your drawings into it and create your own, comic book and stuff like that. So there's another one too, but I looked at that one and it wasn't all that great. But I think these two are really ones to kind of start off and dabble with. To start, if you're a passionate storyboard artist or a comic book creator and want ways to get your content out there, even going on lulu.com. I remember I used to use that for college, which is a publishing company, web publishing. And so if you have something and you want to put it out, you use one of these applications, and then you get it published, and you start getting your content out there to start creating a buzz for the comic book industry.
Very cool. Yeah, the comic book industry is getting hit. I think they went like 3 months without selling a single comic.
Yeah.
That's hard.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, well, my Creator's Tip of the Week is actually an Instagram page.
Cool.
And it's called Lens_addiction. LENS_addiction. And Lens Addiction is so basically what they do, it's pretty cool. They give you a lens, they show you a lens, they tell you what the lens is, they put it on specific cameras, and they'll show you what that looks like. What that lens looks like on that camera. So if you ever have a question about like, I wonder what this specific anamorphic or this lens looks like on the red, they'll show you an example of that lens done in a film.
Awesome. Yeah.
And they'll show you what the lens looks like so that you can always take a look and see, okay, what do these lenses look like? It's pretty cool. They've got a ton of different lenses. That's and awesome. I know that they're constantly adding, and they're pulling from different films and different movies and things that
awesome.
show specifically what.
Do they have
lens was able
also
to
on
do.
their potentially what camera or?
Yeah. So for the most part, all of these are so far that I've seen, they're all on the Arri Alexa Mini.
Okay.
So it's like what they'll do is they'll have a camera, and then they'll feature like 6 or so lenses, and then you'll see on that camera what those lenses look like. Gotcha. And then they'll do another camera, and then they'll do 6 or so different lenses, and then you're able to see. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's pretty cool because sometimes, like especially as a DP and you're trying out a new equipment and a new camera and you want to see what it looks like, you have what the lens looks like, and then you can see what the lens, how the lens looks.
It's a quick look to get an idea. Oh, I like the way this looks, and then take it to the rental house and start testing it yourself.
Yeah, and then you can test it yourself. Once you've seen it, it's like, oh, this is precisely the look that I was going for.
That's cool.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, that's it for this week's episode of The Harvest, episode 15. Thank you for joining us. Special thanks to Alana Despena, our producer, who puts all these things together. You're going to see a lot of the notes in the show notes at the very bottom of the YouTube page. So Mount Harvest has a YouTube channel, and on the YouTube channel you can see all of the Harvest episodes, and underneath each one you can get all of the show notes. You can kind of access the links that we talk about even in the Creator's Tip of the Week and some of the things that we talk throughout the entirety of the episode. You can also check out our Patreon page, which has all of our episodes on there and everything, all of our resources for The Harvest. That is patreon.com/The Harvest Podcast. Again, that's patreon.com/The Harvest Podcast. For any short questions, you can reach me on Twitter at xgarcia.
And I'm at Jonathan Harvest.
And for any longer questions, you can reach us at info@mountharvest.com. That's our email, info@mountharvest.com. We'll get all those questions, whether or not it's questions specifically about things that we talked about or some new topic questions that you may have. We field all those things. If you send them to us at info@mountharvest.com, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you guys very much.
Yeah, and please like, share, and subscribe so we can get this content out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Join us at thepatreon.com/The Harvest Podcast for some BTS footage of our cinema production life.